Spirits book. We are going through the third part of the Spirits book, the moral laws, and chapter 12, the moral perfection. And today we have a very big topic, right? That unfortunately is not unknown for any of us. Maybe one day, right?
Maybe one day.
It's a hard one for us to deal with and for us to accept. Before we start, I would like just to say that in some of these messages, and we have one of the questions here, that the spirit that wrote this message is the spirit of Fenelon. And Fenelon was question 917, and Fenelon was a French archbishop, and he lived in the time of King Louis XIV in France in the 1700s. And so just for us, not to be also impressed by the way he speaks, the language he utilizes, because it's very much in tune with what he was and how France in the time of Kardec as well was a very, very Catholic country. Okay, so we will start with question 913, and I think it's Philip that is going to be reading for us, right?
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
What vice may we label as the root of the others? Selfishness. As we have repeatedly told you, every wrongdoing can be traced back to selfishness. Study all the vices, and you will see that selfishness is at the root of them all. You will never succeed in eradicating them until you attack them at their root. Only then you have destroyed the selfishness that is their cause. All your efforts should be focused on this end, as selfishness is the plague of human society. All those who attempt to reach moral excellence must uproot every selfish feeling from their heart, because it is incompatible with justice, love, and charity. It offsets all other qualities.
It is very clear what the spirits are explaining to us here. And in my opinion, it doesn't require that much as going deep into that in terms of what is selfishness and how it plays or how it is at the root, like it says here, of every imperfection that we have. One thing that I think is very important for us to mention is that when the spirits are talking about selfishness, they are not talking about the care that we have to have for ourselves, which is completely different. We have studied even in this third part of the Spirit's book, in the moral laws, about conservation, how we have by all means try to look to preserve us, to preserve our lives and all of that. So it doesn't mean, like many could understand, that we would give up on, taking good care of ourselves because now I just have to take care of others. Like, if I have food, I'm not going to take food because there are so many people hungry in the world. I'm going to give all my food to those in need. Obviously, it will come to a point where we will not survive. So this is not what we are talking about here. This is a different way of of analyzing it, because many people will say, oh, it's just easier if I just give up, if I just give my life to contemplation, to prayer, to this and that. But it doesn't mean that selfish is not there, because in a way, when you do that, that is an extreme that will make you a burden to society, you're being selfish, because you're trying to escape having to deal with that, or having to be held into account from what you still cannot deal with. So, and here the whole point is for us to accept. So if anyone asks you, are you selfish? Unfortunately, I still am selfish, because it's part of human nature now. But I'm trying to become aware of that, where my selfishness manifests more intensely during the day and in my behaviors. When do I feel more selfish? Right? What kind of comments am I making that can show is still, or can show other imperfections, like, for instance, prejudice. I remember the first time I came to this country, and I was just on vacation back then, and I heard more than a couple of Americans complaining about people that come to this country and take your places, your workplaces and this and that. This is a selfish way of, putting themselves. You're never going to lose a job because there is a foreigner working there. I mean, there will be other things for you to do. It's a way of trying to, excuse yourself from something that is not happening to you. So we have to be very careful, and sorry that I gave this example. But I remember that it was something that shocked me at that point, because, all of a sudden I felt unwelcome. I was just on vacation, but even then, I remember that I felt unwelcome in a way, because there was this kind of way of thinking of that, other people would not deserve, right? And we know that there are many countries that will think this way in one way or another, that, considering that most all the countries are colonies, right? There is no way we will not feel like that. So I think the whole point for us here is learn to understand that, like the Spirit says here, they say here, it's a plague of human society. And it's something that is at the root of every bad behavior, imperfect personality traits that we have. If you dig down, it came from there. It's manifesting in one branch or another, but it came from there. And the only way always to solve problems is accepting they do exist. Any question, comment?
Yeah.
So let's read a little more.
9:14. As it is noted in personal interests, or rooted in personal interests, it seems to be very difficult to entirely remove selfishness from the human heart. Is it possible? As human beings become enlightened in regard to spiritual things, they attract less value to material things. As they free themselves from the shackles of matter, they reform the human institutions that foster selfishness. This is accomplished through education.
So the question, but Kardec's question is very pertinent here, because the way the spirits were presenting, I mean, it's a plague, it's in everyone, it's very serious, right? It's the root of everything. So now how can we get rid of that? And the way the spirits tell here is gradually. It will not happen overnight. It is a process, and it is directly connected to our process of enlightenment. Because for the moment, even when we are talking about spiritual things, I'm sure there is a point where I will say, I'll pray more because then I'm going to be God's favorite. Or, God going to look at me first, right? If I kneel down, if I do this, I mean, even in terms of our understanding with spirituality, with religion, we will be thinking in terms of material things, right? I mean, if someone is very nice to me, of course, this person is going to be a favorite. So now here I am trying to, to bargain with God, right? You favor me, I'll give you more. Like if God is in need of my prayers, okay, I will say 10 holy merits to God, and and God will like it. What will he do, or God will do in that, right? So here the Spirit says very clearly, okay, all right, let's take it easy. It is a process that will happen. So there is a solution, but the solution is, as always, in hard work. Right? Any question or comment? Let's go to the 9:15.
Can't see that top line.
Oh, sorry.
Great. As selfishness is inherent to the human race, will it not always be an obstacle to the reign of absolute goodness on earth? Selfishness is your greatest evil, but it belongs to the spirits incarnated on earth, who are of an inferior nature and not to the entirety of the human race. Consequently, those spirits, in purifying themselves through successive lives, shed their selfishness like their other impurities. Are there none among you who have rid themselves of selfishness and who practice charity on earth? There are more than you think, but they are not well known because virtue does not seek to bask in the spotlight. If one individual like this exists, why should there not be 10? If there are 10, why should there not be 1,000? And so on.
So here the spirits are talking about our level of evolvement, right? As a planet of, going through a transition, you're starting the new era of regeneration. But recently, transitioning from trials and atonement, we will not find spirits that are completely or mostly deprived of selfishness. So this is what we will be seeing. But the spirits tell us here, the more we go on, the more we go through this path of self-enlightenment, the more we will be seeing this disappearing. And the thing is, it makes it very clear that it doesn't mean that because the majority or the ones that are in more in evidence, being the ones that are, seems to be very far from this kind of commitment on working on themselves, that the others that are doing that do not exist. And if we accept their existence, we will then go from the field of theory to practice, to saying this is no longer, is not an illusion. It is not impossible. There are people that are like this. And if there are people that are like this, so there could be more. And I could be one of those people. And so this is how, we go and grow in numbers, always not meaning that, always understanding that it doesn't, because we don't see that many, that they are not there working behind the scenes. Any question or comment? Okay, let's see. It's a hard topic, I know. It touches us so deeply. Okay, can you read 9:16, please?
Selfishness increases with the civilization that seems to strengthen and intensify it. How can the cause destroy the effect? The greater the wickedness, that more hideous it is. Selfishness has to do a vast amount of harm, so that you may understand how crucial the need is to eradicate it. When human beings overcome selfishness, they will live like brothers and sisters by mutually helping each other through a sense of solidarity. The strong will then support the weak rather than oppress them, and no one will lack the necessities of life, because everyone will obey the law of justice. This reign of good is what the spirits are responsible for preparing.
In another part of the books of the codification, we have the spirits telling us that material progress doesn't follow, the intellectual progress doesn't necessarily is followed by moral progress. So in this case, the question of Kardec saying, but we are becoming each time more a civilization, but because, of the modernities that they could have at that point, 19th century, and imagine today us in the 21st century. But one thing is not necessarily related to the other. So now we have all that, but we are still using many of those resources more to amass for ourselves, and even to destroy others. It doesn't mean that in terms of personal growth, spiritual enlightenment, we have evolved that much. And now there are even more things for us to amass. There are even more, material interests at our reach. And then we want more. And then we want to subdue others. And this is how they are saying that sometimes before it gets better, it gets worse. It is the transition, because one is not and now we see it more. It's more visible. What we didn't see before, now everyone sees, everyone is aware. And while Philippa was reading, I was thinking about an opposite way of thinking in terms of selfishness, because like we say, if today they announced that there will be a hurricane or something, any kind of commotion, what we will do? Run to the supermarkets and empty the shelves. I'm not gonna be thinking, I'm not gonna say I'm not, but let's say we're not going to be thinking about the next person that would like to have a can of tomatoes like I want to, right? And I specifically talk about tomatoes because there is this story about Chico Xavier where he was going, to the supermarket buying, or to, street fair to buy tomatoes. And then he would pick a good tomato and a bad one. A good tomato and a bad one. And then the person that was accompanying him said, why are you picking those, bad tomatoes? And he said, because I have to leave good ones for the next person. We're not there yet. All right. When was the last time that we went to buy groceries and you thought, I need 2 fruits, but I can take one that is not that good, right? Well, this is what not being selfish means. And one day, believe it or not, is going to be our second nature. Because the idea of depriving someone of the same things, privilege, it will be horrible to us. I will not be able to enjoy that, knowing that I took each and every last one of them, not leaving anyone to my neighbors, to my brothers and sisters. You see, and it is in the little things of life. Sometimes we do that in elevators, right? You wanted to arrive faster at home, your home, and you see that someone is coming, but you don't stop the elevator because otherwise you have to stop more, and until the person arrives and until it stops in another floor, it will take longer for you to arrive at your home. Simple things like that, or your workplace, right? I'm not even going to ask who has already done that, right? Or just miss it because, I was not paying that much attention. Okay, deceive me that I like, right?
I have a question.
Mhm.
May I?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. If the dimension Earth is intrinsically not a perfect one, intrinsically not too advanced either, by the time we feel that feeling of unselfishness, we're going to be in another dimension, not on this one, because by definition, this dimension itself is selfishness. Am I making sense? Like I'm saying, okay, there'll be a point in time in which is not being selfish is going to be like second nature. It's going to be just like a state of affairs, but not in this dimension.
Well,
I cannot aspire to be unselfish in this dimension, because if I was totally unselfish in this dimension, I wouldn't be in this dimension unless I have a mission to teach others.
yeah.
Am I making sense? Like my question, my doubts. I don't know. So can you elaborate on what I'm on my what you call it, dilemma, my question?
I just don't know if you would use the word dimension, okay, because I think it would be more the spiritual state that we will be, whether incarnate or discarnate. But if you mean it's not going to be a planet as, not so well advanced like planet Earth still is, I mean, thinking about myself, I really wouldn't mind if you wanted to take me to a better neighborhood because I already deserve it. I feel like, I have the sentiments of, others that live in this other neighborhood or even dimension, like you mentioned. Okay.
Or planet, if you want to call it planet, is okay with me.
Yeah, it's not going to be a concern for us. Actually, if we have the opportunity because of our spiritual involvement to be in a different kind of planet, in a more ethereal, even physical body, I mean, one that is not going to give me so many, distress, so much distress like this one, and etc. I don't see us really having a concern in relation to that. Right. I mean, I think it's like, you're taking a 12th grader to be a sophomore already, saying, no, you have the condition to be a sophomore, and let's make this transition. But if you take them to the kindergarten, or you have to start all over again, that would be, I would think, harder, right, in this sense. So in relation to your question, I really don't see a problem exactly with the place, because it's not the place, it's how we are going to feel. Today, all imperfection makes us suffer. And they are the root of our suffering, of our pains, physical and emotional, spiritual pain. So now, if I'm getting better and the pains are not that great, I don't mind. I mean, on the contrary, I'm going to be happy. I don't know if you want to say something in relation to that, Paco?
No, you explained that. You're looking at it from a very personal, individualistic perspective, but I'm looking at it in terms of like you said, a perfect spirit would live in a planet or in a dimension according to his elevation. I was born on planet Earth because my elevation spiritually pertains to planet Earth.
Yes.
And
Yes.
okay, my characteristic as a spirit that has evolved most likely resembles that of planet Earth. And planet Earth, still selflessness is intrinsic to that planet or to that dimension.
But you see, very much like the planet is evolving, like it came from primitive world, it went through trials and atonements, it is going to regeneration, it is going to grow as well. And if the worry is about continuing him here or not, at this point, we are really hoping that we will continue to be here because it's getting better. Now, there has been, it was never better than today, right? Before, with all the
Yes. It has
and
gotten better. Yeah.
yeah. So, each year, each decade, it is going to get better. So there will be, we will have different characteristics. We will see with different tendencies. We see now, okay, we are breaking from 1, 2 generations ago, 3 generations ago with the values and acquiring new values. There are more equalitarian, for instance, right? In all of that it has been a transformation. One thing that I remember, I mean, I think about sometimes, they're in the same line of thinking. I would never think, I guess 20 years ago, that I would see people not smoking in restaurants. I mean, it was so common. I remember one day I was in a different country, and I went to McDonald's. And there were so many people smoking in the McDonald's. And I said, oh my God, if you have to smoke in a fast food restaurant, how bad it is, right? You go there to get a burger or something, or fries, and you eat and boom, you're out, right? Not like today that we stay, the after Starbucks generation, right? It was not like you were going to just sit there. Today we can sit longer at McDonald's, but it was not like this before. So now we are already living this new condition where where, you know, I'm just picking one example like this. I mean, if, you know, 50 years ago, you did not see same-sex people dating openly on the streets, and you feeling, oh my God, love is beautiful. Okay, like we should have, you know, so many things are changing in terms of respect, of, you know, acknowledging that everyone has their free will, they have their preferences in each and any case. But and so that's why I think, even if it means a different dimension, you know, I'm going to sign in for it. I cannot wait for when I don't need to walk anymore, that I can just glide through the streets, you know. And if hard work is required, and beating the selfishness down, this is what I'm going to be doing, because everything will represent more happiness for me. But it's very hard for us to say, you know, what our condition will be, Paco. I think we still have no clue. We may still be flesh and bones like we are today, but morally more evolved, less subject to illnesses, to other things, but morally more evolved, and not necessarily just in a mission, I think. But when we are talking about what it is to come, it's very hard for us to know, except from what the spirits anticipate to us. Okay.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Anyone else? No. So let's read
17.
17, sorry.
How can we overcome selfishness? Of all human imperfections, selfishness is the most difficult to uproot. It is influenced by matter from which human beings, still too close to their origin, have not yet been able to break loose, as human laws, society, and education all support it. Selfishness will be gradually weakened as your moral life gains dominance over your material life, through the knowledge that Spiritism gives you regarding the reality of your future life, stripped of allegories and metaphors. When Spiritism is properly understood and identified with beliefs and habits of humankind, it will transform all your customs, traditions, and social relations. Selfishness is based on the importance you attribute to your own personality. Spiritism makes you look at everything from such an elevated standpoint that all sense of individuality is lost in confronting this immensity. Spiritism battles selfishness by destroying self-importance and revealing its true nature. Human beings often become selfish by experiencing the selfishness of others, which makes them feel the need to put themselves on the defensive. Seeing that others think of themselves and not of you causes you to think of yourself rather than others. Charity and fraternity must become the basis of all social institutions, the legal relations between nations and individuals. Only then will individuals think less of their own personal interests, because they will realize that others have thought of them. Humankind will then experience the upright influence of example and contact. Amidst the present deluge of selfishness, considerable virtue is needed for human beings to sacrifice their own interests for the sake of others, and those who make such a sacrifice often receive little gratitude for such restraint. Those who possess this virtue are welcome into the kingdom of heaven with open arms, while those who have thought only of themselves will be cast aside on Judgment Day and left to suffer in loneliness. Fenelon.
That although the spirit here repeats many of the things that we were telling before, in this case is not necessarily repetition, is re-emphasizing what was said before, and we are going to be seeing that in terms of the characteristics of Kardec's question as well. He are you really saying that? You know, not exactly in those terms, but this is him trying to get the final, you know, final meaning for our level of involvement, answers possible for us to know how to conduct ourselves. And so the spirit here emphasizes again that it's the worst thing we can have is in the root of every imperfection, and that there is only one way for us to read ourselves, which is not going to happen overnight, which is by the same measure that we becomes more spiritual, we will become less selfish. But it is still a byproduct of society. So we even have this saying, you know, that we use to today: fend for yourselves, right? So this is how we learned, and this is how, you know, mostly we see people behaving. Like, I have to think for myself first. I mean, it's only for me. And in this sense, when we are talking about it, we understand perfectly well why the motto of Spiritism is without charity, there is no salvation. Because charity here means the death of selfishness. I cannot truly be charitable thinking about others, the needs of others, if I'm selfish. But this is something that is going to happen day by day. And even when the spirit says here, you know, how we are traumatized by, you know, the goodness we do, and that there are not paid back in return, there is not necessarily appreciated, that may lead us to think that it's all in vain. And when he mentions here, those who possess this virtue are welcome in the kingdom of heaven, is what Paco was talking before. Kingdom of heaven is not an address in paradise like we learn from, you know, religions. Kingdom of heaven lives within us, because we see that even in the spirit realm, from what the spirits describe to us, we go to places that are good or bad, that we will find more sadness or happiness according to how we are. So kingdom of heaven is really what we are, inhabited in us, is in accordance with our spiritual involvement. But of course, this is the vocabulary that we understand until today. And what is the Judgment Day? The Judgment Day is when I finally open myself to, you know, to the reality of what I am, and will say, oh my God, how could you do that, those things? You have to, you know, to be condemned, so to say, to make amends for what you did before. But it's not a judge, it's not God, it's our conscience, you know, claiming us to readjust ourselves. And the only way that I can do that is by doing the opposite of what I was doing before. So this is the Judgment Day. And of course, if you are selfish, if you do not cultivate friendships, if you are not altruistic in certain, at least to a certain point, who is going to be by your side? Who is going to care about you if you just think about yourself? So this is why loneliness, because this is what we will be sowing, along our behaviors, right? Any question or comment?
I have a comment. I think this part that talks about charity and fraternity must become the basis of all social institutions, the legal relations between nations and individuals. And I think when I thought about this, some countries like the Nordic countries, like Sweden and Finland, Norway, where you understand there's a sense of equality, right? And the state is actually supporting you and give you the assistance that you need, and crime is at a lower level. You realize it's like a domino effect, right? Because then you have this reform from within, right? The system, people understand the necessity of having everybody being taken care, right? So it reduces crime, and I think this is this change of vibration, you'd say, right, which starts on the individual and sort of like reverberate to the collective. And eventually, I think when I think about a movement that would sort of like put everybody on the same path to evolution, it's something like that, right? It's an example of like how we can overcome this sense of selfishness slowly, right? It's a process, but it's happening at pockets of the earth, and it's clearly a movement that is part of progress.
And you see, just I don't know, okay, it's just a theory that crossed my mind now. Even when people try to diminish the value of the Nordic people by saying, oh, you find high levels of suicide, high numbers of suicide already, and all of this, I think that in a way it is because there is an inner process happening, which means we go into this phase of clarity that sometimes, not knowing exactly how to deal with that, you feel shame of yourself.
Yeah.
And there could be one explanation. Now, I don't have to worry about health issues. I have the support and, and now I have more time to turn to myself. And because there is a lack of a more, a broader spiritual knowledge, although they do have, and it's in the root of some of the civilizations, the shamans and etc. But it is still difficult to deal with ourselves, with what we see. And I think this comes the anguish and other things. But I mean, this is just a theory that crossed my mind right now, because this is what everyone says, and it just not necessarily checking the numbers to see if the percentage of the population is really the highest one or not. So yeah, it's a point for us to think about.
Yeah, I mean, you also think, as you grow, and Derek, we're still periods in involvement, and I think the more you see, like, you're being in a better position than everybody around you, right? And the refugee crisis, and they're like part of that process. I am sure the more you get to me, they're not perfect spirits, so there is this anxiety about like, okay, I'm doing much better, but the more involved I get, and my sense of security is only mine, because everybody around me is in chaos. I'm sure there's an effect on the mind of people that gets a little more ahead of the game.
Because this is when you really can just, let's say, focus on your moral transformation. It was not necessarily there,
Right.
or in high levels, right? It was enough to make a better society, but not enough for you to deal with your own issues.
Yeah.
And for this, I think it's not fair for us to judge.
Right, I agree.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let's read the rest. And this is a part that I really love. The Kardec's comments.
Praiseworthy efforts are being put forward to help advance the progress of humanity. Kind and charitable thoughts are encouraged, stimulated, and honored now more than at any other time in history. And yet, selfishness continues to plague society. It is a social disease that affects everyone, of which everyone is more or less the victim, and should be fought like any other epidemic. To this end, we must emulate the methodology of a skilled physician and begin by tracing the disease to its origin. We must seek out in every division of human society.
Please appoint an AMR expert technician or call 877-600-0503
I'm sorry.
to service this computer. Thank you.
We must seek out in every division of human society, from families to nations, from the hut to the palace, all the obvious and obscure causes and influence that sustain and foster selfishness. Once the causes of the disease are established, the remedy presents itself spontaneously through the combined efforts of all, and the virus is destroyed gradually. The cure may take a long time because the causes are numerous, but it is not impossible. That being said, it can only be successful by getting to the root of the evil, that is, through education. Not the education that aims only to educate people, but the one that also aims to make them moral individuals.
Let's stop here, okay? So this is so magnificent, this comment by Kardec. I mean, he was talking about the 19th century, right? Where, of course, like we always say, is the best time of all of them is the time that you're living when you look to the past. And let us remember that just in France alone, they had three major wars, right? The war of the 1870, that was Prussia against France, and then the two world wars that overtook Europe and all that, and all this display of selfishness and etc. So now we are in the 21st century, and as a pedagogue, among so many other things, like scholar, scientist, polyglot, and etc., writer, one of the things that he says here that is completely rational is we have to look for the cause. And in this question, actually 917, we have one of the most repeated teachings that Kardec himself brings, which is it's through education that we are going to change society. And he explains, well, as an educator, we are not talking about here educating people through intellectual progress, but through the moral aspects, which is this kind of education. When we start, for instance, since I was talking earlier about this country, one thing that I think it's the most amazing thing that, one of the most amazing things that we have here in the USA is the education in terms of being charitable. Children learn how to start doing charity from kindergarten. You will help wrap up, Christmas gifts, or help to box baskets for this Thanksgiving, make drawings for poor children all over the world. So it's it's not without a reason that United States is by far the most charitable country in the world. And this, we are talking about numbers. We are not guessing here. I work in this area, so I'm up to date with the numbers. And basically, more than 70% of charity that happens in the world, it comes from the US. That is 30% to divide between the rest of the world. So what is that? Is education. Here we are not trying to say that is the perfect society. We are just, pointing to something that is a reality, and that numbers, official numbers will confirm. So this is what, it doesn't matter how spiritual, not spiritual, what kind of religion. Here is the practice. Here is you thinking, a society learning from childhood that it has to care about others. So this is the kind of education Kardec is talking about here. Of course, it is a process. And that is only going to get better generation after generation, but it has to become at some point. Any question or comments, or should we read the rest? Let's read the rest, then, and so let me see, and then we finish. Okay.
Proper education is the key to moral progress. When the art of training the moral nature of human beings is as easily understood as the art of training the intellect, a corrupt nature can be straightened out just like a crooked sapling. However, this practice demands a great deal of tact, experience, and profound observation. It is a huge mistake to assume that possessing scientific knowledge alone is enough to enable the teacher to exercise it successfully. If we study, for instance, the lives of children, whether rich or poor, and note all the bad influences that act upon their weaknesses from the moment of their birth, taking into account the ignorance and negligence of those who are responsible for the upbringing of these children, and the improper means employed in moralizing them, it is no wonder to find so much wrong in the world. If the same skill and care is given to the training of the moral nature as to that of the intellect, human beings would discover that if there are obstinate natures, there are also, in a greater number than you might think, those who require only the proper cultivation in order to yield good fruit.
Although let's stop here. Although we know that we definitely bring our tendencies from previous incarnations, this is why when we reincarnate, we come basically feeling like a clean slate, right? I mean, there's a whole new story to be written, and our parents, or the ones that are responsible for our education, they should pay attention to our tendencies and try to guide us in the right way and the right morals. But of course, not having had received that themselves, it makes it very hard from them to teach to a new generation, values that they didn't have or they don't have themselves. So they grew up hearing that a certain civilization is less than the other. They grew up hearing about concepts of prejudice. They grew up hearing that the richer are better than the poor somehow. So this is something that we teach our children. And they, at first, they will not understand, our prejudice, but they will start learning with us, right? In terms of our behavior, like when we try to teach a child not to lie, and then somebody phones you and you tell the child, tell that I'm not here. You know, it's you are teaching the child something that is dubious. I mean, should I lie or should I not lie? Because at this point, they cannot reason. You know, oh, okay, I understand. This is, you know, a necessary lie for the moment. You know, there is no that kind of thinking is yes or no. And the way we act as not being in this way, that's why Kardec tells us here is in education. And if we didn't have the opportunity, because we are the result of our generation, now we can certainly open our minds, and it's better late than never. We can even come to our children and say, listen, I know you're teenagers or even more grown-ups now, but there are values that I taught you that was not right. And allow them to come to us and to call our attention to certain behaviors, understanding that this is the way we learned, but also helping us in this process of growth. I think it's very important for us to learn that. And again, remembering about reincarnation is, you know, what you don't like today, you may probably be tomorrow, because you have to leave the object of your hatred. So we have to be very careful as well. Let's read the last paragraph. Oops, the last two.
Human beings want to be happy, and this natural desire prompts them to work tirelessly to improve their condition on earth and seek out the causes of their ills in order to address them. When they understand thoroughly that selfishness stimulates pride, ambition, greed, envy, hatred, and jealousy, and causes constant distress, that it brings trouble to all social relations, provokes conflict, destroys confidence, turns friends into enemies, and forces each individual to remain constantly on the defense against each other, then they will also see that selfishness is incompatible with both happiness and security. The more they suffer from selfishness, the more intensely they feel the need to fight it, just as they fight diseases, dangerous animals, and every other source of disaster. They are compelled to act as such out of their own best interests. Selfishness is the source of all vices, just as charity is the source of all virtues. Destroying one while developing the other should be the goal for all those who seek to guarantee happiness in the present life and in the next.
So the thing is, the more we develop one, the less we will have of the other. And this is how we will transition from one way of being to another that is going to bring us much more peace and happiness. You see, if you have a colleague at your workplace that gets a promotion, many people will feel like, I deserve that promotion. We will be judgmental. I'm not, or even if you say, no, it was not my place, but that person definitely didn't deserve, or we will be very judgmental. As opposed to, oh my God, that was a dream for this person. So dreams do come true. So I can still have hope in my dreams, because my dreams one day is going to be accomplished as well. So we should look at the happiness of others, at the accomplishments of others, as good signs that good things happen. And it happens to everyone. It's not just the bad things. The good things happen to everyone. And we are the ones that are going to make it happen. I mean, and the more we contribute for the success of others, the more we are going to contribute for our inner peace. You know, we have some societies in the world that are very dangerous place because of poverty and then criminality and all of this, and the citizens try to shelter themselves instead of working for the betterment of the situation of the place, so they wouldn't have to fear any longer to go out in the streets. You know, so it's a process of education of the ones that have more or have more possibilities, and education of the other ones that, like it was mentioned here before, if no one is thinking about you, why should we care about the others? And this is why we will have, you know, this criminality and so many other things, because at that point, I'm just thinking about myself, about my own interests, and not having, you know, a good education, not caring that much about the justice of the world that is still seems to favor only some privileged ones. We are going to fend for ourselves. So this is not a society that we want any longer. But like Gandhi said, be the change you want to see in the world. It starts with us. And this is a work for us, you know, as individuals to do, right? Any questions or comments?
Can't wait to get there.
Yeah, me too. Like I said, sometimes, you know, Philip, I can't wait to live in the future. I'm not even dead yet, and I'm killing myself and seeing myself back, I don't know, in 50 years or so, and maybe more, I don't know. just to be on the sure side, you know, that things are going to be a bit better. And yeah, you know, it's extraordinary. And I'm sure at the time of Kardec, 19th century, people were thinking the same, was just longing for what the bright lights would bring, you know, Thomas Edison and penicillin and, you know, anesthetics and all the other things that have been, air conditioner, you know, sewage, bathrooms, right? Showers and all of that, even processed food.
Well, we've gone through so much progress in this lifetime. I remember as a very young child visiting houses that were still set with outhouses here in New York City. So, and I noticed the other day that building is gone.
Yeah, and I mean, television now. We have a TV on our hands, right? Like this
Mhm.
whole device, and I mean, it's amazing. It is amazing. So we can only imagine in another 50, 100 years what is going to be. But not only talking about, you know, this
Technology.
technology progress, but also talking about how much we have start learning about each other, caring about each other, because now we don't go completely oblivious to, like, for instance, the war that is happening now, right?
Yeah.
That everyone talks about. We don't go oblivious to that anymore. We know what is happening. And if we cannot do much, we can at least pray and you know, send our good vibrations, but we can do something. And we feel for, you know, both sides that are dying, because at the end we know that, you know, people are suffering in both sides. They have to follow their commands, but you know, so it's a completely different time now. Okay.